You are listening to Radio Koraput. Today we are going to talk about qualitative journalism and in the field of journalism, how much we should be having an opinion from a journalist and what are the parameters and what are the guidelines, what are the restrictions and what are the boundaries that the journalist should take care of while reporting something or while saying something about some event or some story. To have a talk, we have Professor Sourav Gupta from Central University of Odisha. We welcome you, sir, and we would like to talk about these factors which affect or which create an impact on qualitative journalism by a journalist.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. When we talk about journalism, there are two broad notions of journalism. The first notion being the objectivity, which refers to the presentation of facts in its truest form to the readers and the audience. And the second notion is the interpretation. Interpretation refers to or requires a journalist to go beyond the fact. So, on one hand, we have information, fact, truth. And on the other hand, we have the bearing of the fact and the truth on the society and on the lives of the people. It is a very difficult situation in which a journalist is caught. On one hand, he has to present the fact, and on the other hand, he has also to interpret the fact. And in doing so, he must not violate the ethics of the journalism, the moral responsibilities which are associated with the noble profession of journalism, simply because of the fact that while interpreting, there is every temptation and chance for the journalist to deviate from objectivity. However, I would substantiate my point with a quote of a famous person, journalist, Lester Markle, editor of the Sunday New York Times, who said, "It is reporting news depth and with care, news refreshed with background materials to make it comprehensive and meaningful. It is objective judgment based on background knowledge of a situation or appraisal of an event, which are essential parts of news." Now, I would like to come to the mechanism in which a media house operates. Basically, 90% of the news items which we find in a newspaper or which we read online are products of news agencies. All the newspaper houses, they subscribe to news agencies like the PTI, ANI, Reuters, TASS, and so on. So the news agencies basically supply news to the media houses. That is why you'll see that almost in every newspaper, most of the news items are basically derived from news agencies. Now, where does the interpretation come?
So, how
If
much percentage do you think that the newspapers carry from the agencies in comparison to their own reporters?
I think obviously, I think it is somewhere near 80 to 90%. The
Hmm.
agencies are the main backbone of the newspaper, um, and only 25%. I think it will be of their own exclusive news collected by their own appointed correspondents.
So in this process, we can assume that we can come to a point that because when the news is supplied by the agencies, they don't give the names of the person who is contributing that. So about 75% of journalists, at least 50% of journalists who are working, their names people don't know about them.
Yes, actually, that is again part of this has become a canon of the profession of journalism.
Yeah, yeah,
Basically, byline is a very coveted achievement in our profession.
yeah.
When our teachers used to say in universities that After working for a decade, you
Mm.
might get a byline.
Yeah.
So yes, that is there.
Now, when the newspaper reports uh, his own journalist or own reporter, very often they give the byline. But there is no chance of giving a byline when it is supplied by some other agencies. So, while talking about the interpretation, so an unseen, invisible person writing something and giving some perception, we don't know who is giving the perception and what is his background and what is his this thing, and we read about his perception.
Actually, what happens is when the news is selected through a procedure
Yeah,
from actually, news keeps on coming throughout the day from the agencies.
yeah.
So there is a selection process in every newspaper house,
Mm.
and after selection, now here the role of interpretation comes.
Yeah.
Interpretation is basically very much dependent on the editorial policy of that particular newspaper where the news will get published.
Right.
So the newspapers, especially the news editors, the people at the desk, the sub editors, what they do is they reshape the news provided by the agency according to their own editorial policy. And there is a discussion, newsroom discussion on that. And they write the news according to the taste and flavor and the audience of that particular media house. Now, what happens is otherwise, this is a necessary action because otherwise, all the newspapers would look alike the next day.
Mm.
What this interpretation does is there are some important functions of interpretation. First of all, it uh, it it highlights the social implication of the news, how it is going to affect our life. This is number one. Secondly, it on an economic and political scale, it it measures the information, the importance of the information, how important it is on the economic and political scale. And thirdly, and it is the most important thing, is that how the newspaper as an institution is viewing that particular news.
Mm.
So this is what interpretation does. And interpretation by theory is a very useful thing for the simple fact is that it it allows the people, the audience, to understand, to comprehend the repercussions beforehand and take protective measures. Basically, interpretation is extremely pro people and it is for the common people. I would say that interpretation is not really required for educated intelligentsia, but for the common people, it really serves a lot. However,
When we see the visual media, when some agency provides some news or some visual to the desk there, and for the interpretation, many people come there, sit there, they give their own opinions and try to simplify that. And in the process of simplifying, they make it complicated with the crowd,
exactly.
with the shouting.
Exactly. That is why interpretation has also been criticized by many journalists and editors.
Mm.
Basically, many people feel that the role of a journalist should be limited to presentation of facts only, and the media houses should let the people interpret, the readers interpret, rather than they interpret them.
Right.
However, there is a very thin line on right interpretation and wrong interpretation, on interpreting for the welfare of the people and in interpreting for misguiding people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this was pointed out very early in our country by Mahatma Gandhi. I'll come to what Gandhi said, but before that, I'll just like to tell, for the information of the readers, that basically interpretation as a journalistic mode became very popular in the international scenario after the First World War, because there were many people who were unable to understand that why the World War was happening at all.
Mm.
And the World War continued for a long period, And every day there were events which were happening which involved international relations, political ups and downs, which were beyond the comprehension of the common people. So the press had to intervene, and they had to, make an interpretative sort of journalism to make the people understand that why and how and what was the repercussion of the World War. So from that is how interpretation came. The second reason why interpretation became very popular and it's still continuing to be the strongest trend of journalism is when the media market opened up, there were competing news organizations, both competing with each other. Then there was a need for exclusivity, which indirectly persuaded the news houses to think that how can I make my news we have the same news in hand, but how can I make my news stand out from the rest?
Yeah,
So
something.
that has yeah. So that has also led to increase in interpretation. But now let me say what Mahatma Gandhi has said. His views. Mahatma Gandhi had very closely observed the British journalism from the very beginning. And he was not at all happy with many of the trends that the British were adopting in journalism, and he developed his own brand of journalism. Right. For example, regarding the advertisements. The advertisements, Gandhi has categorically said that I do not want to take advertisements in my newspaper because I believe that advertisement is basically a mechanism which is given by a few people who are impatient to get rich. And when I publish advertisement, I am also indirectly helping them to misguide the people. So this was his notion of journalism. One very interesting thing, Gandhi's observation, I would like to quote. He says, the journalist, the true function of journalism is to educate the public mind, not to stock the public mind with wanted and unwanted impression. I would like to all of you to please underline these two words, that wanted and unwanted impression. That means he has also studied the readers also here. He is saying that when we read a newspaper, we are basically looking for our own interpretation. Means I have interpreted an incident in my own way, and I want the newspaper to write exactly that.
Yeah.
So that is wanted impression. And unwanted impression is what the newspaper is basically trying to impose on. What many journalists and many so-called panelists in today's TV panel discussions, they shout at the top of their voice and they try to prove that what they are saying is the only truth in the world. So wanted and unwanted impression.
And categorically saying that that is what people wanted to know.
Exactly. This is also known as much later during the 60s. There was a study during the American elections also, which is known as the people's opinion. And from there, one theory was developed, agenda setting theory, where they said that there are two kinds of agenda. One is public agenda, another one is media agenda. Media always tries to prioritize what are the important issues, but the public knows what is important to them. And these two agendas never really meet. They are in parity with each other. So, to continue with what Gandhi said this is very important. The journalists are not content to stick to facts alone. So Gandhi has already observed that the journalists are going beyond facts. Next, he says, journalism has become the art of intelligent anticipation of events. This is particularly regarding interpretation. Gandhiji is saying that a journalist is trying to foresee what has not happened or what is about to happen, how the people are going to be affected. There is no harm in it. The problem is when the journalist crosses the line and he wants to give unwanted impression, which he mentions in the very next paragraph. So I think during interpretation, a journalist has to be very, very careful. and very careful, and he has to be extremely responsible.
And because the
And
perception, making a perception basing on a hollow background on the subject, or less, how much we know about that particular subject that we will be seeing the posting, or we will be giving our opinion and our perception and trying to impose that on the people who might be knowing it, who might be more knowledgeable on that particular subject than the journalist himself, and the journalist tries to impose on that. So it's a very difficult or challenging task, that how to
yes,
maintain that.
yes, yes. Actually, Gandhiji has also written about how to actually interpret.
Mm.
When he says, actually, I think language and writing skills are a very important part of journalism.
Mm.
One who is blessed or one who practices
Mm.
the writing and one who is into the art of using language can be a good journalist.
Yeah.
Gandhiji says regarding his Indian opinion, which he brought out in South Africa, he
Mm.
is saying that you cannot imagine, my people cannot imagine the restraint which I am practicing when I sit to write every piece of the Indian opinion.
Mm.
And I'll quote him that he's saying that the newspaper press is a great power, but just as an unchained torrent of water submerges whole countryside and devastates crops, even so, an uncontrolled pen serves but to destroy. If the
Mm.
control is from without, it proves more poisonous than want of control. It can be profitable only when exercised from within. I think the entire quality of journalism is
Mm.
defined extremely well by Gandhiji in this phrase.
Mm.
I mean, this language which gives us the power to be objective, to be truthful, and it is the lack of language which leads us to violation of ethical journalism.
Mm. And lack of accessibility, or the intent to access to the basic information behind that particular story or the event, and trying to say that I have all the information. That also, that gap also makes it very difficult for making a proper interpretation.
I would not say lack of access, but I think the next thing which you said, lack of intent. I
Yeah.
think that is very important. Very often, journalists take their audience and readers lightly. They feel that, okay, I think I'll get away with it.
Mm.
Let's not really, they become lazy sometimes at a vital juncture. So I think, yes, that tendency is very much there.
Now, why I'm saying lack of access is that now the state is completely keeping its immune from the accessibility of information from the journalists. Like it is there is a there comes a direction by the state to the employees not to speak anything to the media, and information is needed by the media. So they make outside, standing outside the office, they make their perception that this might be, and that might be. So if the access information accessibility is more, comparatively, I think interpretation could have been better.
Absolutely. I mean, the access is access is a thing which is always blocked. I mean, even from the first day of journalism to till now, and even after so much of democratization of information, people say that we are living in an information society. We have everything on the World Wide Web. But it has been seen that in every country, irrespective of what kind of government they have, there is a little bit of suspect, suspicion, and fear between the state machinery and the press. That
Yeah.
is always there, and that will remain. The sooner it goes, the more transparent the state machinery becomes. It's better for them. Actually, sir, I would like to say one thing here. In India, actually, the press has actually the role of press has been viewed in a negative light right from the beginning.
Right.
The first newspaper of our country was Bengal Gazette, Hickey's, James Hickey's Gazette. So that ran into a trouble with the then Viceroy, and it was stopped by force. Then the national movement was going on, freedom struggle. So that inspired many people to start newspapers, and
Mm.
they ran into trouble with the government, British government. British government, they made one act after another, one act after another to stop the press. So in India, from right from the beginning, we have never viewed the press as the friend of democracy or as the real fourth estate of democracy.
Mm.
Somebody, an agent who can actually supply information to the state, to the government, and actually can help the government in its function. Rather, we have always kept them at loggerheads. But
And
after the
continuously
first,
the pressure is
yes, sir.
mounting on the journalist to be positive, is imposed on the journalist rather than trying to ask the state to be positive towards the towards sharing the information.
Yeah, actually, the responsibility, the onus of being positive lies on both the
Yeah.
state and the journalist as well.
Mm. Yeah.
It won't work otherwise. I mean, when
Mm.
I see, the say a collector of a district like Koraput, when I mean, he in the social media when he gives out the food items which are being served to the quarantine centers. So
Mm.
that is an example of a positive attitude. I
Mm.
mean, he is basically trying to wipe out the fear which people have regarding this quarantine center.
Mm.
So I think these are practices which should be done more and more. And the point of the journalist becoming positive, again, it depends on the quality of journalism. Everything comes down to the quality of journalism.
Yeah, yeah. So at the age of every single person is coming up with the YouTube channels and own media house at home. So how do you see that? What are the basic parameters that you should be seeing in the journalists and also the social media journalists to adhere to, so that the quality of the journalism can be preserved and protected?
I think it is a welcome thing that YouTube channels are coming up and social media platforms are coming up, because we really feel that we need a departure from this so-called big media house. I
Yeah.
mean, they are only after money, and they are, ready to distort facts and to agitate people to any extent for their own mercenary profit. So
Mm.
we need a departure. So I welcome these
Mm.
social media
Yeah.
platforms, but
Mm.
they have to remember one thing: accountability, truth, fairness, objectivity. These are the basic canons of journalism, ethics of journalism.
Mm.
And I mean, the journalist, the man who is running the social media platform or the YouTube channel, he has to be very, very accurate in whatever he broadcasts, because there is no mechanism to check whether he is saying a truth, true or false,
Mm.
right or wrong. It is the burden is on him to,
Mm.
and if he fails, if there is a lack of credibility, he
Mm.
will not only it will not only affect him, but it
Mm.
will jeopardize this entire possibility of the new media. I mean, this word has become cliched, but I am saying this new media, backed up by individual performance and empowered by technology. So
Yeah.
this is a wonderful possibility. Every
Mm.
person who takes this chance should take a pledge that I will not deceive my people.
Yeah, that's what, because the smaller the venture is, the greater proximity of the nearby people is that much increased. So a person who is running a YouTube channel or this social media platform, he is more answerable to the people who are surrounded by him, because they will be the direct listeners or the direct viewers or direct readers, and he should have the credibility of in front of them, so that they have a faith on him, so that despite of thousands of channels coming up, somebody waits for his opinion and his interpretation.
Absolutely. This is the basic premise on which this media is living. And that
Yes.
is the backbone of this kind of media. Today, I mean, we have so many channels. Well,
Yes.
I mean, we are seeing the news. But again, somewhere down the line, we really look forward to Radio Dhemsa or
Yes.
Radio Koraput for
Yeah.
that bit of information which the big mass media will never be able to collect.
Right.
So credibility is the utmost premise, and it should be maintained at any cost.
Yeah.
So
Thank-
that is basically what Gandhi had said.
yeah. 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 Thank you, Professor Gupta, for giving an in-depth analysis to the perception and to the qualitative journalism, and from the bigger house to the individual houses that is coming up through the YouTube channels. Thank you for giving uh, tremendous inputs for those who are coming up with the journalism in the social journalism sector and also mainstream journalism. I hope
Thank you.
all the journalists who are listening to this particular talk will be benefited, and those aspiring souls who want to be journalists also, they will be getting the guidelines, and most importantly, the readers, the viewers, the listeners who are watching for a qualitative journalistic approach from the journalists, they must be having a clarified stand with the wonderful quotes by Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you for coming to this platform once again, and hopefully we'll be talking over time to time on different other issues also. And thank you again with gratitude from the listeners of Radio Koraput. Remain here. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you very much.